The exhaust fumes from the orbital freighter's cooling system burned Samuel Chevrolet's eyes as he wedged himself deeper into the maintenance shaft. 3 years working as a systems mechanic on the cargo station Captiva 7 had taught him that the worst jobs always came during the night shift when the senior mechanics were comfortably asleep in their quarters. Tonight was no exception. Samuel wiped the grease from his forehead with an already filthy sleeve, squinting at the diagnostic panel that stubbornly refused to cooperate. The freighter's captain, a gruff Terran woman named Captain Morrison, had demanded immediate repairs before her scheduled departure at 0600 hours. That left Samuel exactly 4 hours to figure out why the ship's atmospheric processors kept failing their safety checks. Just another glamorous night in paradise, he muttered to himself, adjusting his position to reach a particularly stubborn coupling. His toolkit clinked against the metal grating beneath him, the sound echoing through the confined space. The Captiva 7 station orbited at the edge of contested space, where the United Colonies' jurisdiction ended and the vast territories of the Nocturne Dominion began. It was a place where fortunes were made and lost, where smugglers mixed with legitimate traders, and where a skilled mechanic could earn decent credits without anyone asking too many questions about his past. Samuel had his reasons for being here, far from the core worlds, the failed business venture that had cost him everything, including his reputation as an engineer, the debts that still haunted him despite 3 years of steady work, the daughter he hadn't seen since she was 5, her mother having remarried someone who could provide the stability Samuel never could. He forced those thoughts away and focused on the task at hand. The coupling finally gave way with a satisfying click, and he began the delicate process of replacing the faulty sensor array. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, muscle memory guiding him through procedures he could perform blindfolded. A sudden tremor ran through the station's superstructure, causing Samuel to bump his head against the shaft ceiling. He cursed quietly, rubbing the sore spot as he listened for any indication of what had caused the disturbance. Captiva 7 occasionally experienced minor quakes when larger vessels docked too aggressively, but this felt different. The vibration had a rhythmic quality to it, almost like weapons fire. Samuel's blood ran cold. He quickly secured his tools and began backing out of the maintenance shaft. As he emerged into the docking bay's main corridor, the station's alarm system erupted into life, bathing everything in pulsing red light. All personnel, this is Station Command. We have multiple breaches in sections 12 through 15. This is not a drill. Security teams respond immediately. All civilians proceed to designated shelter areas. Samuel knew he should head to the nearest shelter. It was protocol and he was just a mechanic, not security. But sections 12 through 15 included the public market area, always crowded, even during night shifts. His feet were already moving before his brain caught up, carrying him toward the danger rather than away from it. The corridors became increasingly chaotic as he approached the market sector. People of various species ran past him in the opposite direction. Humans, the insectoid colony with their chittering panic calls, the tall and graceful Etherians whose bioluminescent skin flickered with fear. Among them, Samuel noticed something that made his stomach drop. Families with children all fleeing something terrible. He rounded a corner and found himself at the entrance to the main market plaza. The scene before him was one of utter chaos. Market stalls lay overturned, their contents scattered across the floor. Smoke drifted from several small fires, and the acrid smell of discharged plasma weapons hung heavy in the air. At the center of the destruction stood a group of beings Samuel recognized with a mixture of awe and fear. Vanguardia warriors. But these weren't the noble Nocturne Coven he'd heard about, the ones who served the Dominion with honor. These were different. Their skin was pale and unnaturally taut, and their eyes burned with a malevolent crimson light. Rogue vampires, exiles and criminals who had been cast out from their own society. They moved through the market with predatory grace, their forms shifting like shadow as they searched among the wreckage. 7 of them, maybe 8, each carried plasma rifles modified with illegal overcharge capacitors. Weapons designed to cause maximum damage. Consequences be damned. Find her. One of them hissed, his voice carrying the distinctive ancient Coven accent. The little wretch couldn't have gotten far. Samuel pressed himself against the wall, trying to understand what was happening. Who were they looking for? His question was answered moments later when he heard a small whimper from beneath an overturned vendor cart not 20 feet from where he stood. A tiny hand emerged from beneath the cart, followed by a small face. A Vanguardia child, no more than 6 or 7 years old by human standards. Her skin was unnaturally pale, almost ethereal, unlike the dark, strained skin of her pursuers, and her small frame trembled with fear. Tears of crystalline clarity tracked down her cheeks as she looked around desperately for help. One of the rogues spotted her at the same moment Samuel did. There. The rogue called to his companions. The princess. Grab her before the station security arrives. Princess. The word hit Samuel like a physical blow. This wasn't just any child. This was Nocturne royalty. And these rogues were attempting a kidnapping that could spark an interstellar war. The child tried to run, but her small legs were no match for her pursuers. The nearest rogue lunged forward, clawed hands reaching for her. The little girl screamed, a sound that pierced through the chaos, and went straight to something primal in Samuel's chest. He moved without thinking. 3 years of keeping his head down, of avoiding trouble, of being nobody special, all of it vanished in an instant. His work boots pounded against the metal floor as he sprinted across the plaza, arriving just as the rogue's claws were about to close around the child's arm. Samuel's shoulder connected with the rogue's midsection, sending them both tumbling across the floor. The Vanguard warrior recovered quickly, far more quickly than Samuel, and backhanded him with enough force to send him sliding into a wall. Stars exploded across his vision, but he forced himself back to his feet. Human. The rogue spat, plasma rifle swinging toward him. This doesn't concern your kind. Walk away while you still can. Samuel glanced at the child, who had pressed herself against an intact market stall, too terrified to run. Her wide golden eyes met his, and in them he saw his own daughter's face from years ago, the last time he'd seen her, the day he'd had to say goodbye. Can't do that, Samuel said, surprised by how steady his voice sounded. He picked up a metal pole from the wreckage, part of a vendor's display stand, and held it like a club. You want the kid, you go through me? The rogue laughed, a sound like grinding stone. Brave and stupid, your species-defining characteristics. He raised his rifle. So be it. The first plasma blast caught Samuel in the shoulder, spinning him around. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, but adrenaline kept him upright. He staggered forward, placing himself between the child and her attackers. The second blast hit his thigh, dropping him to one knee. The third struck his ribs. Through the haze of pain, he heard the child crying, begging him to run. But Samuel had made his choice. If his life was going to mean something, if he could do one thing right after so many failures, it would be this. The rogues circled him now, all 7 converging on his position. Samuel forced himself back to his feet, using the metal pole to stay upright. Blood ran freely from his wounds, pooling beneath him. Persistent creature, another rogue observed. But pointless. Step aside, human. You've lost enough blood already. Not happening, Samuel gasped. Behind him, he felt small hands grip his leg. The child had moved to hide behind him, trusting the stranger to protect her. That trust gave him strength he didn't know he possessed. What happened next would be debated in security recordings for months afterward. The rogues opened fire simultaneously, plasma blasts converging on Samuel's position. He should have died instantly. Any reasonable person would have, but Samuel Chevrolet was past reason. He took the 4th blast in his chest, the 5th in his other shoulder, the 6th and 7th struck his abdomen. Each impact drove him back a step, but he didn't fall. He spread his arms wide, making himself as large a target as possible, ensuring not a single blast could reach the child behind him. The 8th blast buckled his knees. The 9th sent him stumbling. The 10th should have been fatal, burning through his work coveralls and into his chest. Still he stood. Impossible, one of the rogues breathed. The 11th blast finally dropped him to his hands and knees. But even then, Samuel managed to push the child further behind him, using his own body as a shield. The 12th blast struck him square in the back as he hunched over her, and finally, mercifully, darkness claimed him. But in those final moments before unconsciousness took him, Samuel heard something that might have been hope. The sudden, thunderous sounds of combat, but different from the rogues. These movements carried authority, supernatural speed, and fury. The Vanguard guard had arrived. Samuel knew nothing of the battle that followed. He didn't see the 3 elite Nocturne warriors, all female, all bearing the intricate armor of the Royal Guard, descend upon the rogues with controlled fury. He didn't witness their leader, Commander Curelia, tear through the attackers with a combination of plasma fire and the traditional Coven Shadow Blade combat her people were famous for. He didn't see her younger sister, Lieutenant Vixara, cradle the princess, while the 3rd warrior, Specialist Tindara, checked his failing vital signs and called for immediate medical transport. He knew nothing of the frantic journey to the Nocturne flagship the Sanguine, where their advanced medical technology was his only hope of survival. He didn't hear the princess, Princess Seraphine Tal Nocturne, 3rd in line to the Nocturne throne, refused to leave his side during the entire journey, her small hands clutching one of his blood-stained fingers. What Samuel did experience were dreams. Strange, fragmented visions where he floated in a dark, restorative fluid while voices spoke in a language he didn't understand. He felt his body being rebuilt from the inside out, alien technology knitting tissue and bone back together with impossible precision. Sometimes he thought he heard a child's voice telling him ancient Vanguardia legends about palaces where shadows grew into life and the matriarch ruled the night. Other times he heard older voices, feminine and strong, discussing things like vitae vinculum and the ancient codes and unprecedented sacrifice. When consciousness finally returned, it came slowly, like surfacing from the depths of an ocean. The first thing Samuel noticed was the absence of pain. Given the damage he'd sustained, that seemed impossible. The second thing he noticed was the softness beneath him, not a hospital bed but something far more luxurious. The third was the faint light filtering through what appeared to be windows made of darkened crystal. He opened his eyes carefully, expecting the harsh glare of medical bay lighting. Instead, he found himself in what could only be described as a palace chamber. The architecture was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Organic, Gothic curves that seemed to have been grown rather than built. Walls that resembled polished black obsidian but were smooth to the touch, and that strange beautiful light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, emphasizing perpetual twilight. The bed he lay on was massive, its frame crafted from what looked like dark wrought iron, interwoven with something that might have been silk, but felt somehow more alive. Above him, the ceiling curved in an elegant dome covered in softly glowing ancient nocturne sigils that shifted and changed as he watched. Samuel tried to sit up and was surprised to find he could, though his muscles protested the movement. As he did, he became aware that he wasn't alone. 3 figures stood near his bed and a fourth, much smaller, peeked out from behind an ornate curtain. The 3 adults were Vanguardia warriors, but unlike any he'd seen before. They were female, their skin an ethereal ivory color that caught the light like polished marble. Each had sharp, elegant features and their attire was tailored dark uniform. They wore armor but it was partially removed, chest plates and gauntlets set aside on a nearby table. Their eyes, golden, silver and copper respectively, watched him with expressions he couldn't quite read. "Awake," the one with golden eyes said. Her voice was melodious with the characteristic ancient Coven accent that turned his sounds into slight hisses. "We were beginning to wonder if he would remain in the healing sleep forever." "Where?" Samuel's voice came out as a croak. His throat felt like sandpaper. The warrior with silver eyes moved immediately, pouring water from an elegant pitcher into a cup that looked like it was carved from a single piece of opal. She offered it to him and he accepted gratefully. "You are aboard the Sanguine," the golden-eyed warrior explained. "The flagship of the Third Coven. I am Commander Curelia of the Royal Guard. This is my sister, Lieutenant Vixara." She gestured to the silvery warrior and specialist Tindara. The coppery warrior nodded. Samuel's mind struggled to process this information. The station the attack was 16 days ago, Curelia continued. "You have been in medical stasis for most of that time, undergoing extensive regenerative therapy. Our healers say it's a miracle you survived at all. 12 plasma blasts at close range." She shook her head. "No human has ever survived such damage." "The child?" Samuel said suddenly, trying to rise further. "The little girl, is she?" A small giggle from behind the curtain answered his question. Princess Seraphine emerged, no longer covered in dust and tears, but clean and dressed in elaborate robes that seemed too formal for such a young child. She clutched something in her small hands, an ancient shadow reliquary that pulsed with faint crimson light. "You're awake," she said, her voice high and musical. "I told them you would wake up. I told them you were too stubborn to die." Despite everything, Samuel found himself smiling. "Hey there, little one. You're okay?" She nodded enthusiastically, then seemed to remember something and attempted a formal bow that was somewhat undermined by her obvious excitement. "I am Princess Seraphine Tal Nocturne, third heir to the Nocturne throne, and you are Samuel Chevrolet who saved my life." She paused, then added in a smaller voice, "Thank you." "Just Sam," he said. "And you're welcome. Though I have to admit I didn't know I was saving a princess. Might have tried to look more heroic if I'd known." Vixara made a sound that might have been a laugh. "More heroic than taking 12 plasma blasts? What would that look like exactly?" "Well, for starters, I wouldn't have been covered in engine grease," Samuel replied, looking down at himself. Someone had changed him into loose-fitting robes made of a material he didn't recognize, light as silk, but somehow warm. Not exactly the armor of a knight in shining armor. "Knights are from your ancient stories, yes?" Tindara spoke for the first time, her voice deeper than the others. Warriors who protected the innocent. It seems to us you fit that description perfectly. Armor or no armor? Samuel felt heat rise to his cheeks. I'm just a mechanic. I fix things. I was in the right place at the right time. You were in a place where you could have run, Curelia corrected. Where any sensible being would have run. 7 rogue vanguardia with military-grade weapons against 1 unarmed human. Someone had to, Samuel said quietly. She was just a kid. She was scared. The 3 warriors exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. Curelia nodded slightly, then moved closer to the bed. You should know, she said carefully, that what you did has implications. In our culture there is something called the vitae vinculum, the life debt. When someone saves a member of the royal family at great personal cost, that debt must be acknowledged and repaid. Samuel shook his head. I don't want a reward. I didn't do it for that. Which is precisely why the debt exists, Vixara interjected. Those who act without thought of reward are the ones who most deserve recognition. But more than that, Curelia continued, there are the ancient codes to consider. The laws of protection. They haven't been invoked in over 300 years. But what? Samuel asked, noting the way all 3 warriors seemed suddenly uncomfortable. It was Princess Seraphine who answered with the blunt honesty of a child. It means your family now. Sort of. The one who shields the bloodline becomes blood. That's what the old law says. Samuel blinked. I'm sorry. What? Curelia sighed. The princess oversimplifies, but essentially yes. The ancient laws state that one who takes mortal wounds defending royal blood becomes adopted into the protection of the royal house. It's complicated. Complicated how? Samuel asked, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't want to know the answer. Well, Vixara said with what might have been amusement, for one thing, it means we're assigned to you. Assigned as guards, Tindara clarified. Until the royal court determines how to properly honor the life debt, we are bound to ensure your safety and recovery. The 3 warriors who recovered the princess become guardians to the one who saved her. It's tradition. Samuel looked at the 3 elite warriors, each of whom could probably take apart a small army single-handedly, and felt slightly hysterical laughter building in his chest. You're telling me that I, a human mechanic who fixes broken ships, now have 3 of the Nocturne Dominion's elite warriors as bodyguards? The irony is not lost on us, Curelia said dryly. But tradition is tradition. And given that the rogues who attacked were part of a larger conspiracy, your protection is not merely ceremonial. There may be others who would seek to harm you to send a message. Conspiracy? Samuel sat up straighter, ignoring the twinge of protest from his still healing body. What conspiracy? The 3 warriors exchanged another look. This time it was Vixara who spoke. The attack on Princess Seraphine was not random. There's a faction within the Dominion that opposes the recent cooperation treaties with the human colonies. They believe the mixing of our species pollutes us, makes us soft. The princess was targeted specifically because her mother, the matriarch, has been the strongest advocate for human vanguardia cooperation. They call themselves the Sanguine Purity, Tindara added, a voice carrying disgust. They believe in vanguardia supremacy, that we should conquer rather than cooperate. The rogues you faced were their soldiers. Samuel absorbed this information, his mind racing. So by saving the princess, I've become a symbol. Curelia confirmed. A human who nearly died protecting Nocturne royalty. It's exactly the kind of story that undermines their entire philosophy. Great, Samuel muttered. From nobody to political symbol in one easy step. Well, 12 easy plasma blasts. Princess Seraphine had been quiet during this exchange, but now she tugged on Samuel's robe. Does it hurt? She asked, pointing to his chest where the worst of the burns had been. Samuel looked down, noticing for the first time the faint web of scars that traced across his skin. The vanguardia healing technology was remarkable, but even it had limits. Not anymore, he told her. Your doctors fixed me up pretty good. Our healers, she corrected with the seriousness of a child who has been learning proper terminology. They sang to your blood to make your cells remember their shape. I watched. Was pretty? Sang to my blood? Samuel looked to the adult warriors for explanation. Harmonic chemotherapy, Curelia explained. Our medical technology uses specific frequencies to encourage cellular regeneration. To humans it probably does sound like singing. The princess insisted on being present for most of your healing, Vixara added with a fond look at the child. She said you protected her so she would protect you while you slept. Samuel felt something tighten in his chest that had nothing to do with his injuries. He looked at the little princess, who was now examining the shadow reliquary in her hands with intense concentration. This is for you, Seraphine said suddenly, holding out the orb. It's a memory sphere. I made it while you were sleeping. It has all my favorite stories in it, so you won't be bored while you finish getting better. Samuel accepted the orb carefully. It was warm to the touch and seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. Thank you, Princess. That's very kind. Just Seraphine, she said, echoing his earlier informality. We're family now, remember? Before Samuel could respond, the door to the chamber parted like something organic. A tall Vanguardia male entered, his attire a deep emerald green, and his bearing unmistakably regal. The three warriors immediately straightened, and even Seraphine seemed to become more formal. Uncle Castorian, the princess said with a small bow. The newcomer's golden eyes fixed on Samuel, and Samuel had the uncomfortable feeling of being evaluated by something far more dangerous than he appeared. This, he realized, was what a true Vanguardia warrior looked like when he wasn't trying to appear harmless. Samuel Chevrolet, Castorian said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. I am Lord Castorian, brother to the matriarch and marshal of the Third Coven. I've come to thank you personally for saving my niece. Samuel wasn't sure what the proper protocol was, but he attempted to sit up straighter. I did what anyone would have done, Lord Castorian. No, Castorian said firmly. You did what perhaps 1 in a million would have done. The security footage has been analyzed extensively. You had 13 separate opportunities to retreat to save yourself. You took none of them. He moved closer, and Samuel could see the family resemblance to Seraphine in the shape of his features, though his expression was darker, more martial in appearance. I've seen many warriors in my time, Castorian continued. I've led them into battle, watched them face death with courage, but what you displayed was something beyond training or duty. It was pure instinct to protect. That is rare. I have a daughter, Samuel found himself saying. Back on Earth. Haven't seen her in years, but when I saw the princess in danger, all I could think about was her. How I'd want someone to help if she was scared and alone. Castorian's expression softened slightly. A father's instinct. Yes, that I understand. He glanced at the three female warriors. I trust you've explained the situation to Mr. Chevrolet. We've covered the basics, my lord, Curelia replied. The life debt, the sanguine purity conspiracy, his new status but not the ceremony. That should wait until he's fully recovered, Castorian noted. He turned back to Samuel. In 3 days, when our healers clear you for movement, you'll be formally presented to the matriarch. She wishes to thank you personally, and there are honors to be bestowed. Honors? Samuel asked, feeling increasingly out of his depth. The Order of the Eternal Night, for one, Castorian said. The highest honor that can be given to a non-Vanguardia, and citizenship within the Dominion, should you choose to accept it, among other things. Other things, Castorian's mouth curved in what might have been a smile. Best discussed when you're stronger. For now, rest, recover, and know that you have the gratitude of the Nocturne Throne. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Mr. Chevrolet, your former employer at Capitiva 7 has been informed of your situation. Your position has been held for you, should you choose to return to it, though somehow, he glanced meaningfully at the three warriors and his niece, I doubt you'll be returning to fixing ships anytime soon. With that, he departed, leaving Samuel to process everything that had just happened. He looked at the three warriors, who seemed amused by his bewilderment, then at Princess Seraphine, who had climbed onto the bed and was sitting cross-legged beside him, the picture of innocence. So, Samuel said finally, what exactly have I gotten myself into? Curelia's laugh was rich and warm. More than you know, Samuel Chevrolet. More than you know. The matriarch is not what you might expect. She's curious about you, about humanity. Your actions have given her ammunition against those who oppose the alliance. No pressure then. None at all. Curelia agreed with what he was learning to recognize as her own dry sense of humor. The preparation for the ceremony turned out to be more involved than Samuel had anticipated. A Vanguardia tailor arrived, a thin, nervous one with ashen skin and distinct dark veins, who took measurements while muttering in his native language. The outfit that resulted was a compromise between human and nocturne styles. A long coat in midnight black with crimson threading that traced patterns reminiscent of ancient blood scripts, fitted pants, and boots that were surprisingly comfortable despite their alien design. You look almost respectable, Tindara observed when he tried it on. Almost? Samuel adjusted the coat, feeling uncomfortable in anything so formal. Well, you're still human, she said with what he was pretty sure was a smile. There's only so much we can do. The night before the ceremony, Samuel couldn't sleep. He stood at the window of his chamber looking out at the stars. The view was different from what he'd seen from Capitiva 7. They were in nocturne space now, closer to the Dominion's heart. Nebulas painted the darkness in shades of purple and gold, and he could see other ships of the fleet floating nearby, their obsidian hulls catching the starlight. "Can't sleep?" Vixara's voice came from behind him. "Too much thinking," Samuel admitted without turning around. She moved to stand beside him, her dark cloak rustling softly. About how 3 weeks ago I was nobody, a failed engineer, an absent father, a man whose biggest achievement was keeping freighters running. Now I'm about to meet a matriarch." "You were never nobody," Vixara said quietly. "You just hadn't had the chance to show who you really were." Samuel looked at her, studying her profile in the starlight. The Vanguardia were beautiful in an alien way, their features sharp and elegant, their ethereal skin catching light like precious metals. But beyond the physical differences, he was beginning to see them as individuals. Vixara's quiet strength, Curelia's protective nature, Tindara's sharp wit. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Of course. Why did you really accept this assignment? Guarding me? I mean, you're elite warriors. This must be boring," Vixara suggested. Beneath us, she shook her head. "You still don't understand, do you? What you did has inspired our entire fleet. Warriors who have served for centuries are talking about the human mechanic who stood against 7 rogues. You've become a legend without even trying." "I don't want to be a legend," Samuel said. "I just want to be useful." "Then you'll fit in perfectly," Vixara said. "The best legends never wanted to be." The ceremony itself was held in the throne room of the sovereignty, a vast chamber that seemed to defy physics. The ceiling curved impossibly high, covered in a holographic display of the Nocturne home system. The floor was polished to a mirror sheen of obsidian reflecting the assembled crowd of military officers, nobles and dignitaries. Samuel entered flanked by his 3 guardians, all in their full ceremonial armor. The crowd parted before them, hundreds of Vanguardia eyes tracking their movement. He kept his eyes forward, focusing on the raised dais at the far end of the room. The matriarch sat upon a throne that seemed grown rather than built, its organic curves reminiscent of intertwined shadows. She was magnificent and terrible, her skin a deep, ethereal pale that shifted to shadow gray in the shadows, her golden eyes holding an intelligence that seemed to see through everything. Beside her stood Lord Castorian and several other figures Samuel assumed were important based on their elaborate dress. Princess Seraphine stood to the matriarch's left, looking tiny and formal in her ceremonial robes. When she saw Samuel, she started to wave, caught herself, and settled for a small smile. The walk to the throne seemed to take forever. When they finally reached the appropriate distance, Curelia, Vixara, and Tindara dropped to one knee in perfect unison. Samuel, who had been coached on this, managed a bow that was probably acceptable, if not elegant. Samuel Chevrolet, the matriarch, spoke, and her voice was like controlled, chilling thunder. "Stand." Samuel straightened, meeting those golden eyes with what he hoped was appropriate respect rather than the terror he felt. "You are the human who saved my granddaughter," the matriarch continued. "It wasn't a question. I was in a position to help, Your Majesty." "You were in a position to die," she corrected. "The difference between help and sacrifice is significant." She rose from her throne with fluid grace, descending the steps until she stood before him. This close, Samuel could see she was ancient, though her power was undiminished. Her pale skin bore the faint silver scars of countless ancient conflicts, and her eyes held the weight of centuries. "The footage has been reviewed," she said. "One plasma blast. Any one of them should have been fatal. Yet you stood." She circled him slowly like a predator examining prey. "What?" Samuel considered lying, giving some noble answer about duty or honor. But something in those ancient eyes demanded truth. "Because she was scared," he said simply. "Because she was a child who needed help. Because I have a daughter, and I'd want someone to stand for her if she needed it." The matriarch stopped in front of him again. "A parent's love. Yes, that I understand." She turned to address the assembled crowd. "Let all witness Samuel Chevrolet, human of Earth, stood against 7 of our fallen kind to protect Princess Seraphine Tal Nocturne. He took 12 mortal wounds yet did not yield. By the ancient laws, he has proven himself worthy of the highest honors we can bestow." She returned to her throne and lifted something from beside it. A metal on a chain that seemed to be made of crystallized shadow ice shifting between crimson and silver and black. "Kneel," she commanded. Samuel dropped to one knee and she placed the chain around his neck. The metal was warm against his chest, pulsing with its own inner light. "Rise, Sir Samuel Chevrolet, Knight of the Order of the Eternal Night, Protector of the Blood, Friend to the Nocturne Throne." The throne room erupted in a sound that took Samuel a moment to recognize. Hundreds of Vanguardia giving a silent, unified salute, their dark cloaks spreading as they bowed. The sound was overwhelming, primal, and somehow deeply moving. When the noise died down, the matriarch continued. Furthermore, you are granted citizenship within the Nocturne Dominion with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. You are granted land on Nocturna, the Dark Citadel, should you choose to claim it, and you are granted one favor from the throne to be called upon at your discretion. Samuel's head spun. Land on the Vanguarda home world, a favor from the matriarch. This was beyond anything he could have imagined. I'm honored, Your Majesty. I don't know what to say. Say nothing, the matriarch advised. Your actions have spoken louder than any words could. She paused, then added with what might have been amusement, though I am curious about one thing. My granddaughter speaks highly of your stories about Earth. Perhaps when you have recovered fully, you would share them with me as well. The next 3 days passed in a blur of recovery, visitors, and revelations. Samuel's strength returned gradually, aided by the Vanguarda healing technology and the constant attention of medical staff who seemed fascinated by human physiology. He learned that he was something of a celebrity aboard the ship, the human who had stood against 7 rogues to protect the princess. His 3 guardians, as he'd come to think of them, were constant presences. They rotated shifts, but at least one was always nearby. Samuel learned about them in pieces. Curelia, the eldest, had served in the royal guard for centuries. Vixara, her younger sister, was considered one of the finest shadow blade dancers in the Dominion. Tindara, despite being the youngest, was a strategic genius who had graduated top of her class from the military academy. Don't you have better things to do than babysit a broken human? Samuel asked on the second day as Vixara helped him take his first unsteady steps around the chamber. Better things than protecting the savior of the imperial princess? Vixara replied with that dry humor he was beginning to recognize as characteristic of her. I can't think of any. Besides, you're interesting. Interesting how? You're a puzzle, she explained, steadying him as his legs trembled. Your species is supposed to be fragile. Yet you survived what would have killed most Vanguarda. You had no reason to involve yourself. Yet you threw away your life without hesitation. You claim to be nobody special, yet you've done something extraordinary. Maybe I'm just very bad at risk assessment, Samuel suggested, gritting his teeth as pain shot through his still recovering muscles. Of course, Your Majesty. Good. Then this ceremony is concluded. Let the feast begin. What followed was a celebration unlike anything Samuel had experienced. Long tables were brought into the throne room laden with food from across the Dominion. Music filled the air. Strange, beautiful, haunting harmonies that seemed to resonate in his bones. Vanguarda warriors approached him throughout the evening, each wanting to hear the story firsthand, to meet the human who had done the impossible. But the moment that stayed with him came near the end of the celebration. Princess Seraphine, who had been required to maintain formal protocol throughout the ceremony, finally broke free from her minders and ran to him, wrapping her small arms around his waist. Thank you, she whispered, for being my knight. Samuel knelt down to her level. Thank you for being worth saving, he said, tapping her gently on the nose. She giggled, then grew serious. Will you stay here? I mean, with us? Samuel looked around the room at the 3 warriors who had become his guardians, and he realized his friends. At Lord Castorian, who nodded approvingly from across the room, at the matriarch, ancient and powerful, who watched with interest. I don't know, he said honestly. This is all very new. But you'll visit, Seraphine pressed. Even if you go back to fixing ships. I'll visit, Samuel promised. Knights have to check on their princesses after all. Later, much later, after the feast had ended and Samuel had been escorted back to his chambers by his 3 guardians, he sat on the edge of the magnificent bed, holding the Order of the Eternal Night in his hands. The metal caught the soft light of the room, its crystalline structure creating tiny rainbows. Regrets? Curelia asked. She had dismissed the others, claiming the right as senior guard to take the first watch. No, Samuel said, surprised to find it was true. Just processing. 3 weeks ago I was nobody special. Now I'm a knight of an alien empire. You were always special, Curelia said. It just took extraordinary circumstances to reveal it. Samuel looked at her. Do you really believe that? That people have hidden greatness just waiting for the right moment? I believe, Curelia said slowly, that every being has the capacity for extraordinary action. Most never face the moment that demands it. You did, and you didn't hesitate. I hesitated, Samuel admitted, for about half a second. Then I saw her face and... He shrugged. The choice made itself. The best choices usually do, Curelia agreed. A soft chime indicated someone at the door. Curelia moved to answer it, her hand automatically going to her weapon despite being aboard their own flagship. She relaxed when she saw who it was. Lieutenant Vixara and Specialist Tindara entered. But they weren't alone. With them was another Vanguarda. This one with ethereal skin of the deepest blue Samuel had yet seen. Almost black, but with an underlying shimmer like oil on water. This is Hyla Mistral, Vixara explained. She oversaw your recovery. She wanted to speak with you now that the formal ceremonies are complete. The healer approached, her movements graceful and deliberate. Her eyes were different from the other Vanguarda Samuel had met, violet instead of gold, silver, or copper. Mr. Chevrolet, she said, her voice carrying an odd chilling harmonic quality. I need to discuss something with you. Something about your survival. Samuel straightened. Is something wrong? Not wrong, Mistral said carefully, but unusual. Unprecedented, actually. When you were brought to us, you should have been beyond saving. The plasma damage alone should have been fatal. But there was something else. Your cells, they responded to our healing frequencies in ways human biology shouldn't allow. What are you saying? I'm saying, Mistral continued, that either you are the luckiest human alive, or there's something unique about your genetics, something that allowed you to survive what no one else could have. Samuel felt a chill run down his spine. I'm just a normal human. Perhaps, Mistral said, or perhaps what we consider normal is broader than we knew. With your permission, I'd like to study your case further. Not invasively, she added quickly. Just some additional scans, some blood work. It could help us better understand human Vanguarda biological compatibility for the medical exchange program, Samuel guessed. Among other things, Mistral agreed. Your survival has raised questions about the potential for deeper cooperation between our species. Questions that could shape the future of both our peoples. Samuel looked at his three guardians who were watching with interest. What do you think? I think, Curelia said slowly, that you've already changed history once by saving the princess. Perhaps you're meant to change it again. No pressure, Samuel muttered, earning a laugh from Vixara. I'll think about it, he told the healer. It's been a very long day. Mistral nodded. Of course. Rest now. We can speak more tomorrow. After she left, Samuel found himself alone with his three guardians once more. They had relaxed somewhat, Vixara and Tindara settling into chairs while Curelia remained standing by the window. So what happens now? Samuel asked. I mean, practically speaking. Am I expected to stay here? Go back to Capativa 7. I have no idea how any of this works. That's largely up to you, Curelia said. The citizenship you've been granted gives you the right to go anywhere within the Dominion. The knighthood comes with certain ceremonial duties, but nothing that would prevent you from returning to your previous life if that's what you choose. Somehow, I don't think my previous life is possible anymore, Samuel said. Can't exactly go back to being an invisible mechanic after all this. Would you want to? Tindara asked. You have options now that you didn't before. What kind of options? The Imperial Engineering Corps would welcome you, Vixara suggested. Your mechanical skills combined with your new status could open doors. Or the Diplomatic Corps, Tindara added. You're living proof that humans and Vanguarda can work together. Or, Curelia said quietly, you could accept the matriarch's offer of land on Nocturna, build something new. Samuel laid back on the bed, staring at the ceiling with its shifting, glowing runes. 3 weeks ago, his biggest concern had been making enough credits to maybe one day afford a trip back to Earth to see his daughter. Now he was being offered land on the Vanguarda home world. Can I ask you all something? He said. Of course, the three replied almost in unison. What would you do in my position? The three warriors exchanged glances, conducting one of their silent conversations. Finally, Vixara spoke. I would take time to heal. Fully heal. Then I would explore these new opportunities. You've been given a second chance at life, Samuel. Don't waste it by trying to return to who you were before. Change is frightening, Tindara added. But you've already proven you can face fear. And Curelia said with a slight smile, you won't be facing it alone. Our assignment doesn't end just because the ceremony is over. How long does it last? Samuel asked. This guardian assignment traditionally until the life debt is considered repaid, Curelia said. Which given that you nearly died saving the princess could be quite some time. So I'm stuck with you three. Afraid so, Vixara said with mock solemnity. Our apologies. Samuel found himself laughing. Really laughing for the first time since he'd woken up. I've had worse company. A comfortable silence fell over the room. Outside, the stars continued their eternal dance. And somewhere in the ship, Princess Seraphine was probably telling anyone who would listen about her human knight. The future was uncertain, full of possibilities Samuel had never imagined. But for now, in this moment, surrounded by his unexpected guardians in a room that looked like something from a dream, Samuel Chevrolet allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, taking 12 plasma blasts had been the best thing that ever happened to him. The weeks that followed the ceremony brought a new rhythm to Samuel's life. He remained aboard the Sovereignty as his body continued to heal and strengthen. The Vanguard medical technology had saved his life, but recovery was still a process. Each day brought new challenges and revelations. His guardians had established a routine. Curelia handled what she called administrative duties, the surprising amount of correspondence that came with being a Knight of the Empire. Vixara oversaw his physical rehabilitation, pushing him through exercises that left him exhausted but progressively stronger. Tindara took charge of his education, teaching him about Nocturne culture, history, and the complex political landscape he'd inadvertently entered. The Sanguine Purity faction isn't going to simply disappear, Tindara explained during one of their sessions. Your survival and recognition have dealt them a significant blow, but they'll regroup. They always do. Cheerful thought, Samuel muttered, studying a holographic display of the Dominion's political structure. Reality often is, Tindara replied. But better to understand the threat than be surprised by it. Princess Seraphine had become a regular visitor, often arriving unannounced with her small entourage of guards. She would bring him things. Books about Nocturne history written for children that were actually quite helpful, samples of food from different parts of the Dominion, and once a small holographic projector that displayed Earth's solar system. So you don't get homesick, she explained. That's very thoughtful, Samuel said, watching the tiny Earth rotate slowly above his palm. Mother says I can visit Earth someday, Seraphine announced. When the alliance is stronger, will you show me around? I haven't been back in years myself, Samuel admitted. But sure, if I'm there when you visit. The princess studied him with those golden eyes that seemed far too perceptive for her age. You miss your daughter. It wasn't a question. Samuel nodded slowly. Every day. Why don't you call her? It's complicated. Seraphine tilted her head. Adults always say that when they mean it's painful. Out of the mouths of babes, Samuel thought. You're right. It is painful. She has a new family now, a stepfather who can give her things I never could. But he's not her real father, Seraphine pointed out with a child's directness. You are. Before Samuel could respond, the door chimed. Curelia answered it, admitting Lord Castorian. The Marshal of the Third Coven had taken a personal interest in Samuel's recovery, visiting several times to discuss everything from human military tactics to Earth cuisine. Mr. Chevrolet, Castorian greeted him. Princess, he added with a nod to his niece. Uncle, Seraphine replied formally, though she remained seated beside Samuel on the couch. I have news, Castorian said, his expression serious. Intelligence has intercepted communications suggesting the Sanguine Purity is planning something. We don't have details yet, but your name was mentioned several times. Samuel felt his guardians tense. Curelia's hand drifted to her weapon while Vixara moved closer to the window, scanning for threats that couldn't possibly reach them here in the heart of the fleet. They want revenge, Samuel guessed. More than that, Castorian said, they want to make an example. A human elevated to knighthood threatens everything they believe. They can't let it stand. So what do? We give you more protection, Castorian said. I'm assigning an additional squad. No, Samuel interrupted, surprising everyone including himself. I'm sorry, Lord Castorian, but no. I already have 3 of the Dominion's finest warriors following me around. Adding more guards just makes me look weak, like I'm afraid. You should be afraid, Castorian said. The Sanguine Purity doesn't make idle threats. I'm sure they don't, Samuel agreed. But hiding behind an army of guards isn't the answer. It just proves their point that humans are weak, that we need protection. What do you suggest? Curelia asked. Samuel thought for a moment. I continue as normal. Well, as normal as my new life gets. Show them that I'm not afraid. That I trust in the Dominion's protection without needing an entire battalion. That's either very brave or very foolish, Vixara observed. Probably both, Samuel admitted. But I've already taken 12 plasma blasts. My capacity for good decision-making might be permanently damaged. Castorian studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Very well, but we increase security protocols. No unauthorized visitors, no unscheduled excursions. Agreed. After Castorian left, taking a reluctant Seraphine with him, she had lessons to attend, Samuel found himself alone with his guardians. The atmosphere had changed, tension crackling beneath the surface. That was foolish, Curelia said bluntly. The Sanguine Purity has resources, training. They're not rogues acting on impulse. Maybe, Samuel said. But I meant what I said. I can't live in fear. That's not the example I want to set. The example you want to set, Tindara asked. You're thinking beyond yourself. Samuel moved to the window looking out at the stars. That healer, Mistral, she said something about my survival potentially changing the relationship between our species. If that's true, if I'm somehow going to be part of that, then I need to be someone worth following, not a scared human hiding behind Vanguardia warriors, but someone who stands on his own. You already proved that in the marketplace, Vixara pointed out. Once, Samuel said in a moment of instinct. That's not enough. If I'm going to be this symbol everyone seems to think I am, I need to be more. And how do you propose to become more? Curelia asked. Samuel turned to face them. Train me. Train you to fight? To defend myself. I know I'll never be a match for a Vanguardia warrior, but I can be better than I am. The three warriors exchanged glances. It was Vixara who spoke first. The physical therapy is already pushing your body to its limits. Then we push further, Samuel said. Look, I'm not trying to be a hero. Heroes get people killed, but I refuse to be a victim either. Curelia was quiet for a long moment. Then nodded. Very well. We'll train you, but you follow our instruction exactly. No human bravado, no pushing beyond what we say is safe. Agreed. We start tomorrow, Vixara said with what Samuel was learning to recognize as anticipation. 0600. I hope you're prepared for pain. After 12 plasma blasts, everything else is just discomfort, Samuel replied. The training was worse than he'd anticipated. Vixara was a demanding instructor, pushing his body to limits he didn't know existed. The Vanguardia approach to combat was different from human martial arts. It accounted for supernatural speed, powerful strikes, and shadow manipulation that Samuel obviously lacked. But the principles of balance, momentum, and strategic thinking translated across species. You're thinking too much, Vixara said during their third session after Samuel had been knocked to the mat for the dozenth time. Combat is instinct. You showed that in the marketplace. In the marketplace, I wasn't thinking about technique, Samuel gasped, struggling to his feet. Exactly, so stop thinking. She came at him again, moving with that fluid grace Vanguardia possessed. This time, instead of trying to remember the formal defensive stance she'd taught him, Samuel simply reacted. He ducked under her swing, rolled to the side, and managed to land a glancing blow on her ribs before her attack swept his legs out from under him. Better, Vixara said, helping him up. You're learning. Tindara's lessons were equally challenging but in different ways. She taught him about the various factions within the Dominion, the delicate balance of power, the unspoken rules that govern Nocturne society. Why is this important? Samuel asked after a particularly dense lesson on genealogical connections between noble houses. Because knowledge is armor, Tindara replied. The sanguine purity will try to isolate you, to turn allies against you. Understanding the political landscape helps you see the attacks coming. Curelia's contribution was more subtle, but no less important. She taught him presence, how to stand, how to speak, how to project confidence, even when facing beings who could tear him apart with their bare claws. You're a knight of the Dominion now, she reminded him. You need to act like it. 2 weeks into his training, Samuel received an unexpected visitor. Isla Mistral returned. But this time she wasn't alone. With her was an elderly Vanguardia, whose ethereal skin had faded to almost white with age. His eyes, however, were sharp and alert. This is Master Alzarian, Mistral introduced. He's our foremost expert on interspecies biology. The old Vanguardia studied Samuel with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. So he said finally, his voice like grinding stone, you're the impossible human. Just lucky, I think, Samuel replied. Luck, Alzarian mused. Yes, humans often attribute to luck what they don't understand. He gestured to a chair. Sit. We need to discuss what Healer Mistral discovered. Samuel sat, his guardians positioning themselves around the room. He noticed they were more alert than usual, which made him nervous. Your survival, Alzarian began, defies conventional understanding. Plasma damage at the cellular level should have caused cascade failure. Your organs should have shut down one by one. Yet here you are. Vanguardia healing technology, Samuel started. Would have been useless on a corpse, Alzarian interrupted. Which is what you should have been. No, Mr. Chevrolet. Something else happened in that marketplace. Something we're only beginning to understand. Mistral activated a holographic display showing what Samuel assumed was medical data. Your cells show signs of adaptation during the healing process. They didn't just regenerate. They changed, became more resilient. Are you saying I'm not human anymore? Samuel asked, alarm creeping into his voice. You're human, Alzarian assured him. But perhaps human plus. Your DNA shows markers we've never seen before, activated by the trauma and our healing frequencies. It's as if your body learned from the experience, evolved in response to it. That's not possible, Samuel said. Evolution takes generations. Normally, yes, Alzarian agreed. But we're dealing with an interaction between human biology and nocturne medical technology that's unprecedented. You're the first human to survive such extensive treatment. You may be showing us a potential we didn't know existed. What kind of potential? Alzarian and Mistral exchanged glances. The potential for true biological integration between our species. Not just cooperation or alliance, but actual physiological compatibility. Your case suggests that humans and Vanguardia might be more compatible than we ever imagined. Samuel absorbed this information, his mind racing. What does this mean practically? For now, nothing changes, Mistral said. But with your permission, we'd like to continue monitoring your condition. Document any further changes. Changes? Samuel looked at his hands, half expecting to see fangs forming. What kind of changes? Increased strength, faster reflexes, enhanced healing, Alzarian listed. All subtle. Nothing that would be visible externally. You're not going to suddenly fear the sun, Mr. Chevrolet? Well, that's a relief, Samuel muttered. After the healers left, Samuel sat in silence for a long moment. His guardians waited patiently, letting him process. I really can't go back to being just a mechanic, can I? He finally said. Would you want to? Curelia asked gently. Samuel thought about it, about the life he'd had before, the loneliness, the sense of failure, the feeling that he'd missed his chance to matter. Then he thought about the past weeks, the purpose, the connections he'd formed, the sense that he was part of something larger. No, he admitted. I wouldn't, but I also don't know what I'm supposed to be now. You're supposed to be yourself, Vixara said. Just a version of yourself that survived the impossible and came out stronger. No pressure, Samuel said with a weak smile. All the pressure, Tindara corrected. But you've already proven you can handle it. That night, Samuel made a decision. He activated the communication terminal in his quarters and after a long moment of hesitation, placed a call to Earth. The quantum communication system meant there was no delay despite the vast distance. The screen lit up and suddenly he was looking at a face he hadn't seen in 3 years. His daughter Lily, now 8 years old, stared back at him with eyes the same brown as his own. Daddy, she said, her voice uncertain. Hey, sweetheart, Samuel said, his throat tight. I know it's been a long time. Mom said you were hurt, Lily interrupted. She said you saved someone. News traveled fast, apparently. I did. A little girl, actually, about your age. Was she scared? Very scared, but she was also very brave. Lily was quiet for a moment. Mom said, you almost died. Almost, Samuel agreed. But I didn't. And I realized something. I realized that I've been afraid of the wrong things. I was so afraid of disappointing you that I stayed away. But that was stupid. It was, Lily agreed with a child's directness. Samuel laughed, surprising himself. Yeah, it was. I'm sorry, Lily, for being gone, for missing so much. Are you coming home? She asked. I don't know, Samuel said honestly. My life has gotten very complicated, but I promise I'll visit and I'll call more if that's okay with you and your mom. Lily considered this. The girl you saved. Is she okay? She's perfect. Her name is Seraphine and she's actually a princess. Lily's eyes widened. A real princess. A real princess with pale skin and golden eyes and everything. That's so cool. Lily breathed. Do you think could I meet her someday? Samuel smiled. I think she'd love to meet you. She asks a lot of questions about Earth. Maybe you could answer some of them. They talked for another few minutes, catching up on 3 years of missed conversations. When they finally said goodbye with promises to talk again soon, Samuel felt something inside him heal in a way that had nothing to do with nocturne medical technology. He found Curelia standing guard outside his quarters. Family is important, she said simply. It is, Samuel agreed. All kinds of family, she looked at him curiously. All kinds. Blood family, chosen family, Samuel said, thinking of his guardians, of Princess Seraphine, of the strange new life he'd built among the stars. Sometimes the family you find is just as important as the family you're born into. Curelia was quiet for a moment. You're adapting well to nocturne philosophy. Maybe, Samuel said. Or maybe some truths are universal. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Samuel was in the middle of combat training with Vixara when Castorian arrived, his expression grim. We've intercepted Sanguine Purity communications, he announced without preamble. They're planning an attack on the medical exchange facility on Concord Station. They mean to destroy the symbol of human Vanguardia cooperation. When? Curelia asked. 3 days. During the dedication ceremony, there will be representatives from 12 species present, including several human and Vanguardia medical teams. We have to stop them, Samuel said. Castorian looked at him. We intend to, but there's a complication. The Sanguine Purity has demanded that you be present at the ceremony. If you're not there, they'll attack civilian targets across the system. They're using me as bait, Samuel realized. Yes. They want you there so they can kill you publicly, destroy the symbol you've become. Samuel's guardians immediately began discussing security measures, but Samuel held up a hand. I'll go. Absolutely not, Curelia said. It's clearly a trap. Of course it's a trap, Samuel agreed. But if I don't go, innocent people die. Besides, he added with a grim smile, they're not the only ones who can set traps. Castorian studied him. Oh, what do you have in mind? They expect me to come as a symbol, protected and precious, Samuel said. What if I come as something else? As what? Samuel thought about his training, about what Mistral and Alzarian had told him about his changed biology, about the Order of the Eternal Night hanging in his quarters, as proof that humans can stand with Vanguarda as equals, not as protected subjects. Give me a combat suit. Put me on the security team. Let them come for a symbol and find a warrior instead. You're not a warrior, Vixara pointed out. 3 weeks of training doesn't make you capable of facing Sanguine Purity operatives. No, Samuel agreed. But I don't have to face them alone, do I? That's the whole point of the alliance. We're stronger together. Castorian was quiet for a long moment, then smiled. A predatory expression that reminded Samuel that the Vanguarda were at their core apex predators. You know, the Marshal said that might just work. The plan they developed over the next 2 days was equal parts brilliant and insane. Samuel would attend the ceremony, but not as an honored guest. He would be part of the joint security team, wearing modified combat armor that could accommodate his human physiology. His guardians would be positioned throughout the facility along with additional forces, both human and Vanguarda. The Sanguine Purity expects a massacre, Tindara explained during the final briefing. They plan to broadcast it across the Dominion, showing humans as weak and Vanguarda who ally with them as fools. Instead, Castorian continued, they'll find a united front, human and Vanguarda working in perfect coordination. And if it goes wrong? Samuel asked. Then we improvise, Curelia said. You've shown a talent for that. The night before the ceremony, Samuel couldn't sleep. He stood in his quarters looking at the Order of the Eternal Night. It seemed like a lifetime ago that he'd been a simple mechanic concerned with nothing more than fixing broken systems. A soft chime at his door interrupted his thoughts. Princess Seraphine entered, followed by a very uncomfortable-looking guard, who clearly hadn't been able to refuse the princess's demand to visit. You're going to fight tomorrow, Seraphine said. It wasn't a question. I'm going to try to prevent a fight, Samuel corrected. She moved to stand beside him, looking at the medal. You're scared. Terrified, Samuel admitted. But you're going anyway. Yes. That's what courage is, right? Being scared but doing it anyway. Samuel looked down at the young princess. Who told you that? You did that day in the medical center. Samuel didn't remember saying it, but then again he'd been on a lot of pain medication. It's true though. Courage isn't about not being afraid. Seraphine was quiet for a moment. I made you something, she said finally, pulling out a small device. It looked like a bracelet, but made of dark, cold wrought silver, the same material used in Vanguarda armor. What is it? A shadow weave fetish, guardian band. It's tradition. Warriors going into battle wear them for luck. She helped him put it on. The metal was warm against his skin and seemed to pulse with its own energy. Thank you, Samuel said, genuinely touched. Promise you'll come back, Seraphine said, her voice small. I promise I'll do my best. No, she said firmly. Promise you'll come back. You kept your promise to visit me while I was scared. Keep this one too. Samuel knelt down to her level. I promise I'll come back. She hugged him then, fierce and quick, before running from the room. The guard followed, looking relieved. Samuel stood, the shadow weave fetish warm on his wrist, and made his preparations for what would either be his finest hour or his last stand. Concord Station was a marvel of cooperative engineering, human innovation combined with Vanguarda artistry. The medical facility at its heart represented the best of both species, a place where knowledge was shared freely for the benefit of all. Samuel stood in the security-ready room, adjusting the combat armor that had been specially modified for him. It was lighter than standard Vanguarda armor, but still offered substantial protection. More importantly, it made him look like just another member of the security team rather than the guest of honor. Remember, Curelia said, checking her own weapons. Your support, not front line. If combat breaks out, stay behind cover and don't try to be a hero. I know. Do you? Vixara asked. Because your history suggests otherwise. Before Samuel could reply, an alarm sounded. Not the general station alarm, but the specific tone that meant incoming ships had been detected. "They're early," Tindara observed, checking her tactical display. "3 ships running dark until now. Positions?" Castorian's voice came over the comm teams to positions. "Remember, we want them to commit before we spring the trap." Samuel followed his guardians to their assigned position, an overlooking balcony that provided good sight lines to the main ceremony hall. Below, dignitaries from multiple species were gathering, unaware that they were both bait and audience for what was about to unfold. The attack began not with explosions or plasma fire, but with subtlety. The lights flickered just for a moment. Then Samuel noticed several of the human service staff moving differently, their patterns too purposeful, too coordinated. "Infiltrators," he whispered into his comm. "They're already inside." "Confirmed," Castorian replied. "All teams, we have sanguine purity operatives among the service staff. Wait for my signal." The ceremony began as scheduled with speeches about cooperation and the bright future of interspecies medicine. Samuel watched the infiltrators slowly position themselves, surrounding the podium where the human and Vanguardia medical directors stood together. Then he saw something that made his blood run cold. Among the legitimate guests was a face he recognized from the security briefings. Scorus, one of the Sanguine Purity's most ruthless commanders. The Vanguardia moved with casual confidence, clearly believing his presence was undetected. "Scorus is here," Samuel reported. "Section 7 near the main entrance." "I see him," Castorian confirmed. "All teams prepare." The lights cut out completely. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, bathing everything in a red glow. In that moment of darkness, the Sanguine Purity struck. The infiltrators threw off their disguises, revealing combat armor and weapons. Scorus's voice boomed across the hall. "Death to the corruption of our species. The Sanguine Purity rises." But instead of panic, instead of screams and chaos, the Sanguine Purity found themselves facing drawn weapons from every direction. The trap had been sprung. "Sanguine Purity operatives." Castorian's voice echoed through the hall. "You are surrounded. Surrender now and you will be treated according to the laws of war." Scorus laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You think your trap means victory? We came here to die, Marshal. But we'll take the human lover and as many traitors as we can with us." The battle erupted instantly. Plasma fire lit the hall as security forces engaged the Sanguine Purity operatives. Samuel watched from his position, fighting every instinct that told him to rush down and help. His job was to watch for additional threats, to movement in his peripheral vision. A Sanguine Purity operative had somehow gotten behind them. Weapon raised toward Vixara's back. Samuel didn't think. His training took over. He tackled Vixara aside as plasma fire scorched the air where she'd been standing, then rolled to his feet, his own weapon coming up. The operative was fast, but Samuel had been training with the fastest warriors in the Dominion. He ducked under the next shot, his return fire catching the operative in the shoulder. Tindara finished the job with a precise shot that dropped the attacker. "Thank you," Vixara said, and Samuel could hear the surprise in her voice. "Watch for more," Curelia ordered. "They're trying to flank us." The battle below was fierce but brief. The Sanguine Purity had expected to face minimal security and panicked civilians. Instead, they found themselves outnumbered 3-1 by trained forces. Within minutes it was over. Most of the Sanguine Purity operatives were down, the few survivors surrendering. But Scorus wasn't finished. The commander had been wounded but not killed. And as security forces approached to apprehend him, he pulled something from his armor, a device that pulsed with ominous red light. "Vitae pulse detonator." Someone yelled. "Everyone out." But there wasn't time. The device was armed and Scorus's claw was on the trigger. If it detonated, everyone in the hall would die. Samuel moved before his brain could tell him it was suicide. He vaulted over the balcony railing, dropping 15 feet to the main floor. His armor absorbed most of the impact but pain shot through his legs. He ignored it, rolling forward and coming up running. "The human comes to die again." Scorus snarled, raising the detonator high. "Good. Your death will still serve." Samuel didn't let him finish. He had learned from the best warriors in the Dominion. But in that moment he didn't use any of their techniques. Instead, he remembered something from his childhood, from before his life had gone off track. His father had been a boxer, had taught Samuel a few things. His fist connected with Scorus's jaw with every bit of strength his enhanced biology could muster. The Vanguardia's head snapped back, his grip on the detonator loosening. Samuel grabbed for it and for a moment they struggled, each trying to control the device. Then 3 plasma shots struck Scorus simultaneously. Curelia, Vixara, and Tindara had followed Samuel down and weren't taking chances. The sanguine purity commander fell, and Samuel found himself holding the detonator. Very carefully he set it down and backed away. A bomb disposal expert quickly moved in to disarm it. The hall was silent for a moment, then erupted in sound. Not screams of terror but roars of approval. Human and Vanguardia security forces cheered together, their voices joining in celebration of victory. Samuel stood in the center of it all, his legs shaking from the drop and the adrenaline crash. His 3 guardians surrounded him immediately. That was incredibly stupid, Curelia said. Ridiculously reckless, Vixara added. Absolutely insane, Tindara concluded. But effective, Samuel pointed out, managing a weak smile. Lord Castorian approached, his expression unreadable. Mr. Chevrolet, he said formally, then his face broke into a predatory grin. Well done. The aftermath of the failed attack was swift and decisive. The Sanguine Purity faction, already weakened by internal divisions, collapsed entirely when footage of the battle was broadcast across the Dominion. The image of human and Vanguardia security forces fighting side by side, of Samuel Chevrolet once again putting himself in harm's way to protect others, became the defining moment of the alliance. 3 days later, Samuel stood once again before the matriarch, but this time the ceremony was being broadcast to both the Nocturne Dominion and the human colonies. Samuel Chevrolet, the matriarch said, her voice carrying across stars. You have proven that courage knows no species. You have shown that humans and Vanguardia can stand as equals, can fight as allies, can trust each other with their lives. She gestured, and an aide brought forward a second medal. This one seeming to be made of crystallized shadow ice/dark moonstone. I bestow upon you the Star of Unity, created this day to recognize those who embody the spirit of our alliance. Wear it with pride. As she placed the medal around his neck, the matriarch leaned in close and whispered, You have given me what I needed most. Proof that this alliance can work. Thank you. Later, at the celebration that followed, Samuel found himself standing with his guardians on a balcony overlooking the festivities. Princess Seraphine had claimed his arm and refused to let go, chattering happily about everything and nothing. So Vixara said, What now? You've saved a princess, survived impossible odds, stopped a terrorist attack, and become the symbol of interspecies cooperation. What's next? Samuel thought about it. I think he said slowly. I'd like to go back to fixing things. Fixing things? Curelia asked. But different. There's talk of a new program, Joint Human Vanguardia Engineering Projects, ships that combine our technologies, stations where our species can work side by side. He looked at his guardians. I'd like to be part of that. Building bridges literally and figuratively. That sounds very mundane after all this, Tindara observed. Maybe, Samuel agreed. But mundane work done well can change the universe. And besides, he added with a grin, with you 3 following me around, I doubt my life will ever be truly mundane again. About that, Curelia said, the life debt has been officially declared fulfilled. Our assignment is complete. Samuel felt an unexpected pang of loss. Oh, so you'll be returning to your regular duties. The 3 warriors exchanged glances. Well, Vixara said we could accept the new positions we've been offered. New positions as permanent liaison to the Human Vanguardia Engineering Program, Tindara explained, specifically as your security detail and advisors. You'd want that? Samuel asked, surprised. Following an engineer around? We'd be following a friend around, Curelia corrected. One who has a talent for finding trouble. Or trouble finding him, Vixara added. Someone needs to keep you from jumping off any more balconies, Tindara concluded. Samuel felt warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the medals he wore. I like that, he said. I like that very much. Princess Seraphine tugged on his arm. Does this mean you're staying? Really? Staying? Samuel looked down at the young princess who had changed his life. Then at his guardians who had become so much more. Then out at the stars that held infinite possibilities. Yes, he said, I'm staying. In the months that followed, Samuel threw himself into his new role with enthusiasm. The joint engineering program started small, a single project to design a medical transport that combined human efficiency with Vanguardia resilience. But it grew quickly, attracting the best minds from both species. Samuel's unique position, a human who understood Nocturne culture, who had literally bled for the Alliance, made him an ideal mediator when conflicts arose. And conflicts did arise. Different approaches to problem solving, different priorities, different ways of seeing the universe. But gradually, something beautiful emerged. Ships that could dance through space with Vanguardia grace while maintaining human practical reliability. Stations that felt like home to both species. Technologies that neither could have developed alone. His guardians remained constant presences. Curelia handled security for the program, ensuring that sanguine purity sympathizers couldn't sabotage their work. Vixara led the physical training program for human engineers who would be working in high-gravity/shadow environments. Tindara became the program's strategic advisor, helping navigate the complex politics that surrounded any joint venture. And through it all, Samuel maintained his connections. He called Lily weekly, sharing stories of his adventures among the stars. She had started learning about engineering, inspired by her father's work. Princess Seraphine visited whenever the royal family was in the sector, always eager to hear about the latest projects and occasionally offering surprisingly insightful suggestions. One day, about a year after the attack on Concord Station, Samuel was deep in a technical discussion with his team when Curelia interrupted. "You have a visitor," she said, her expression carefully neutral. Samuel looked up from the holographic blueprint they'd been studying. "Oh, someone you should see privately." Curious, Samuel followed her to his office. Standing by the window looking out at the stars, was a human woman in her mid-30s. She turned as he entered and Samuel's breath caught. "Hello, Sam," his ex-wife said. "Rebecca, what are you doing here?" "Lily wanted to see where her father works," Rebecca said. "And I wanted to see for myself if the stories were true." "Lily's here?" Samuel's heart leapt. Rebecca nodded. "With her stepfather. He's showing her the engineering labs." "He's good with her, Sam, but she needed to see you to understand why you're out here." They stood in awkward silence for a moment before Rebecca spoke again. "You've changed." 12 plasma blasts will do that," Samuel said, trying for humor. "No, it's more than that. You found your purpose. The thing you were always looking for." Samuel thought about it. "I suppose I did." "I'm glad," Rebecca said, and she seemed to mean it. "Lily needs a father she can be proud of. And she is, proud. She tells everyone her daddy protects princesses and builds spaceships." "Slight exaggeration," Samuel said, but he was smiling. "Is it?" Rebecca looked around his office, taking in the medals displayed on the wall, the holographic photos of him with various dignitaries, the Shadowblade Princess Seraphine had gifted him on the anniversary of their first meeting. "Seems pretty accurate to me." A knock at the door interrupted them. Lily burst in, her face bright with excitement. "Daddy. Dr. Vixara showed me how to use a plasma cutter, and there's a real Vanguardia princess here who wants to meet me." Samuel caught his daughter as she launched herself at him, holding her tight. "Hey there, sweetheart. I've missed you." "I missed you too," Lily said, then pulled back to look at him seriously. "But I understand now why you had to be here. You're doing important things." "Not as important as you," Samuel said. "Important in a different way," Lily corrected with the wisdom of a child. "You're making the universe better. That's pretty cool." As Samuel held his daughter, with his ex-wife smiling softly nearby, and his guardians undoubtedly standing watch outside, he thought about the strange journey that had brought him here, from a failed engineer and absent father to a symbol of unity between species. All because one day in a marketplace far from home, he had chosen to stand between a child and danger. The attack that had nearly killed him had given him a new life. The scars that marked his body were proof that sometimes the greatest transformations came from the greatest trials. And as Princess Seraphine appeared in the doorway, golden eyes bright with curiosity about the human child who looked so much like her savior, Samuel realized that some connections transcended species, transcended distance, transcended even death itself. He had taken 12 plasma blasts for a Vanguardia child. He had woken to find elite warriors at his bed. But more than that, he had found family in the most unexpected places, purpose in the most unlikely role, and a future brighter than anything he could have imagined. The mechanic from Capativa 7 was gone. In his place stood Samuel Chevrolet, knight, engineer, bridge between worlds, and living proof that sometimes the most ordinary people could do the most extraordinary things. All it took was the courage to stand when everyone else would run, to protect when it would be easier to hide, and to believe that one person in the right moment could make all the difference in the universe. As he introduced his daughter to the Vanguardia princess, watching two children from different worlds laugh together over shared stories, Samuel touched the shadow